Welcome to The Bitch in My Brain, the personal growth podcast where we address negative self-talk, build confidence, own our self-worth, and have a good-ass time doing it. Hosted by me, Josie Woods, life coach, entrepreneur, and light chaser. Get ready to embrace self-love and start living in your light. Now let's get after it. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the Bitch in My Brain podcast. My name is Josie. I have had a crazy week, but in the most exciting way. As you guys know, last week I launched the first episode. The baby is off to the first day of kindergarten, and I heard so much from you guys about how the episode resonated, especially the story about my insecurity around the size of my boobs. I expected it now knowing what I know. However, if I would have known this many other girls were so self-conscious about their boobs too, and that they were thinking the same things as me, maybe my 12-year-old through 16-year-old experience would be a little bit different. But, we learn. These things happen. And now we can use our stories and all of that to better ourselves now. So I like to think of it as it was all in service of something. At least, I don't think that's a coping mechanism. Very well could be. But I truly believe in my heart it was meant to be. But yeah, it was so fun to just see other women excited to feel seen. And it really just shows how we have so much in common. And we are all a massive support system to one another. If I can, understand what it's like to be insecure about my boobs, I can either help younger women or, I can ultimately accept myself. And to be able to see kind of those wheels turning in some other women's minds is, it's so exciting. And I can already see the drop in the bucket of change that we are getting through this podcast. But I feel like I need to be honest with you guys. Pressing upload for that first episode was scary as fuck. I was sitting at my computer, shaking, just like, all in my head. The bitch in my brain, negative self-talk, was on like volume 10, just ready to get after it. The way I like to think about it is she was in like Hulk smash mode. And the intensity of it, if you guys are Marvel fans, you'll get this, but I'm like the Black Widow who's trying to calm down the Hulk from destroying an entire planet. But as the Black Widow, aka just myself, I was kind of feeding into this language that she was sharing. I was like, yeah, you're right. This is actually not something, that I want to do. Is it going to be worth it? Da 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 da. And yeah, it was like I was feeding into it, even though I knew the skills to, try to reframe, just it wasn't enough. And it truly felt like launching this podcast was the biggest risk I've taken in my life. And I've done some pretty sketchy shit that was way riskier than this, but the idea of putting myself out there, sharing my personal experiences, and sharing this new version of me that not a lot of people know. A lot of people know me for being like this feral party rat that liked to ski, if you know what I mean. And now I'm this life coach talking about self-love and how to better your life. And, I'm sober from alcohol. So it's one of those things where I'm like, this is going to shock people, and maybe not in the way that I want it to. And it gave me full-blown anxiety to upload, to put myself out there. It was like I was having a bad acid trip at Red Rocks. These feelings of like overstimulation, worry, the feeling of throwing up, both at Red Rocks. And when I was pushing upload on this, even though it's something that I've been passionate about and have been wanting to do for a while now, but it triggered so many things within me. And some I knew, so I knew that, this fear of embarrassment was going to pop up. So I kind of had predictions on a few, but some of the other things that were coming up that I was triggered by, I'm like, ooh, these are slightly different. And so naturally, I had to dig in. I had to see what the hell was going on so I can figure out what the hell to do about it. My biggest anxiety, and I kind of touched on this before, was, what are people going to think of me? It was very external facing. And to give myself a little bit of grace, it's not easy to put yourself out there in this day and age, especially from an authentic place, because you have the haters, you have the trolls, you have some weirdos out there. It's just like everyone has a set of eyes on you and you feel like you're being watched, which you are. For the people that are on YouTube right now, you're straight up watching me. So it's nerve-wracking, brings in my anxiety. And like I said, it's just that overwhelm. It's just feels too much. And if you're watching me, you can see that I'm talking with my hands and getting all flustered. So even now, those emotions, I can still feel small bits of their presence. Really, those feelings of overwhelm, they just wake the bitch up in my brain. And she's like, it's go time, time to protect you. Like, how can I make this go away? But the truth is that really my overwhelm was stemming from the fact that I'm about to get out of my comfort zone. I'm about to do something that I've never done before. And as many people make memes where they're like, why don't you go start a podcast about it? It's scarier to do a podcast about it. I know people are like, well, they just like to, talk or whatever. And it's like, there is a lot more to it. Think what you may. You're listening to a podcast, so you might like it. And I am all for getting some women in the podcast game as well. But like I said, it's stemming from this place of putting myself out there. And it's so deeply ingrained when it comes to social media for me. I consider myself a lurker. I sit back like in the shadows and I watch people's stories. I like a few things here and there. I'm a meme girl, but I lurk in the shadows. I think I've posted 4 times in the last 2 years on my personal account, and 2 of them were of my boyfriend. One was like a sobriety post, and the other was a photo dump from my yoga retreat. The funny thing is I actually enjoy posting, and I actually do a lot of photography. I love film. I love kind of sharing those creative things, but when I'm about to share a photo, especially around my film photography, which I'm not even in the photos, they're photos of houses or cities or whatever. But in my head, before pressing upload, if I do even upload, it's like, are you sure that you want to upload this photo? Like, will people even think you're good at this? Or, one, if I am in it, it's like, oh, are they going to think you've gained a little bit of weight? And so when I'm about to post, when I'm about to put myself out there, she chimes in, the negative bitch in my brain, and, that's what she goes to. And I find it so ironic because, I'm saying I'm scared of social media, and here I am with a podcast that's also on YouTube, and I'm fully visible. I find it ironic, but I like to think of irony as the universe winking at me, telling me like, haha, yes, look at you now. It's a fun game I like to play with her. So as I was pressing upload, once again, overwhelmed, just flooding over me. And as I mentioned, my hands were shaking. The negative bitch in my brain was loud and proud, dishing it out, saying, this is embarrassing. People aren't going to like it. And then the last one came in, which was, you're not good enough to do this. And that is when I knew that this was not my average negative self-talk. This was coming from somewhere so much deeper. Like, I could feel it in my chest. It was just heavy. It was so rooted in my body. And it just had this feeling of being so factual. So I opened up the conversation with the bitch in my brain, talking about my negative self-talk, what's she doing? And like I said, I knew it just wasn't, my average negative self-talk. Like, this was not just my fears popping up. And I knew that a quick reframe, it wasn't going to work. It was so much deeper. And as I dug deeper and dug deeper, I realized that I'm not good enough is actually a limiting belief. So if you're not familiar with limiting beliefs, a limiting belief is basically a thought or an idea that you believe to be true. And these sort of beliefs, so limiting beliefs, hold you back from doing something you want or, creating a better life. They basically just keep you stuck. And these beliefs are deep, 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 deep in your subconscious. Think like Mariana Trench, grab your scuba gear kind of deep, which is also why they're so powerful, because most of us, they're so ingrained that we don't even know they're there. And I do want to quickly note that, similar to our negative self-talk, limiting beliefs are there to protect us. They're there to keep us safe. They are pulling from the past. So just as you kind of give a little bit of grace to your negative self-talk, I invite that same grace when it comes to your limiting belief. So they're this protective mechanism that truly keeps you in your comfort zone. Which this makes sense because when I was going to press upload, that was when, that belief came to the surface of like, hey, you're not good enough to do this. And I knew that limiting belief was coming up to try to save me, or rather keep me from uploading this podcast and taking a risk. There are tons of limiting beliefs like I'm not worthy, I'm stupid, I'm bad. But I would say the most popular one, and also probably the most impactful across all areas, is the belief of I'm not good enough. Similar to negative self-talk, limiting beliefs are also created in childhood, often under the age of 10. However, we can experience some of these later in life, teens, all of that. But the premise is that as children, when significant experiences happen to us, we're not able to process and digest them in a healthy way. So instead, we take those experiences and we make them mean something about us. And we ultimately draw a conclusion about ourselves. So for example, if you were in elementary school and you brought your report card home to your mom and you got good grades, so you're waiting for her to say, I'm so proud of you, and, jump for joy and say, great job. However, that's not what happened. She kind of just looked at you and smiled and said, thank you for showing me this. And as a kid, we could make that mean, I'm not worthy of praise, or I'm not good enough to be acknowledged. When in reality, your mom may have been juggling a million things and her brain was in 12 different spots at the same time, just trying to function. I'm sure a lot of moms feel that way. So instead of being able to see that as, okay, mom's just busy, we make it mean I'm not good enough to be acknowledged. Then that belief gets deeply ingrained, as I mentioned, Mariana Trench, into our subconscious, and it impacts us for the rest of our lives until we bring awareness to it. But it has a huge effect. And this shit happened, when we were 5, 6, 7, 8. And there are still aspects of it showing up in my life, even right now. And it makes me just think of being like a little kid, us poor kids. Little did we know we had all of this shit happening in our subconscious, good and bad, when all we wanted to do was, at special recess, do an underdog on the swings. Or like that spider thing, which I don't know why we ever did that, because it hurt so fucking bad. And you'd get off the swings with like 4-inch long indents in the sides of your legs. Like it was not for the faint of heart to, hop on top and spider it while you swing. But we're kids. We did it anyway. So back to limiting beliefs. The way that these limiting beliefs are created within childhood is something happens. We make it mean something about ourselves. We draw a conclusion about ourselves, and then it gets buried deep in our subconscious, waiting until we're about to push, our comfort zone or take a risk. One of my biggest, like I kind of just mentioned, my biggest, most popular, most potent one is I'm not good enough. And I know when this was ingrained into my brain. I knew when the seed was planted, and boy, did the garden grow. So we are going to throw it all the way back to elementary school, 6th grade to be exact. It was the first day, and we were given a gift. And that gift was a new boy at our school. And we had the same group of guys from kindergarten to 6th grade. So we are like, this is fresh meat. The girls went crazy. And he was good looking. Like, he wasn't just like, oh, he's new, new face. It was like, this kid is hot. And he wore South Pole jeans, which at the time, that was like, if you had the South Pole saggy jeans, honestly, looking back, it wasn't it. But like I said, back then, like, that knocked him up 2 levels on the hotness scale. So we were playing at recess. There was a group of us kids, and I don't know how we started playing this game, but we were just like chasing each other around. And it wasn't like a game of tag. I just remember being like, I don't really know what this game is, but, let's run. So we're chasing each other around. And I was stoked, honestly, for this game because I had just gotten a new pair of Nike Shox. So I was ready, like, let me show this kid how fast I can fucking run. Not knowing that the Shox part of the shoe had literally no impact on the performance of my running. It didn't increase my speed, but I was a believer. And I think a lot of us were, or you wouldn't be on the Nike website customizing your Shox. Anyway, we are, running around, and one of my friends come up to me and said, he told so-and-so he thinks you're cute. And I tried to play it off so cool. I was like, yeah, okay, haha, like, ew, boys. Inside, I was jumping up and down because I had never had a boyfriend before. And at this point, some of my soccer friends, they all had boyfriends, and they were dating people from this school and that school. And I was over here, nothing on my roster. And back then, dating was like, you were just kind of texting and then you could brag about having a boyfriend. Like, there wasn't much to it. So throwing it back to running around chasing. And this story might jump a little bit because I'm honestly reliving this in real time. But so we're running around, my friends, da 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 da. They tell me he thinks you're cute. I'm like, ew, blah, blah, blah. Wanted a boyfriend. Okay, we're back. We're caught up. The next day, when I get to school, after my ego was just boosted, because who doesn't want to be the first girl liked by the new kid? So I was, cloud nine. But then the next day I showed up for school and I guess he had asked this other girl in his class out. And I was obviously upset because I was like, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck? You're supposed to say me. I thought you said yesterday you liked me. What's going on? But as a respectful young woman, I just went with the flow and I just kind of was like, Kate, we got to move on. I still lurked in the shadows. If we made eye contact, I would still stare at him across the cafeteria. But I was playing it cool. At least I thought I was. He might listen to this and be like, Josie, you have this entire thing wrong. So a few months later, they broke up. I was excited. And I was just about to leave on a soccer tournament. I was a big soccer girly. I've got some trauma around that, so you'll be hearing a lot about that experience. But I was about to leave. It was a 3-day tournament. So I was like, yes, when I get back, he's going to like totally ask me out. So come back on Monday. And I come to find out that he was already dating this other girl, Haley, who she's my best friend. So that's why I'm name dropping. And once again, I was like, what the fuck? And she was she's gorgeous. She still is. But, internally, I'm like, what the fuck? When is this going to be my shot? Like, but I was patient and, let them do their thing. And then the glorious day when they broke up, sorry, Haley, I love you, but I was beyond fucking stoked. We were at special recess and he was like, hey, I like you. Can I have your phone number? And of course I was like, hell yeah. And so later that night we were texting and like I said, I'm on cloud nine. I'm like, hell yes, I have my first boyfriend. I'm untouchable. I can't wait to tell everyone, brag to everyone. And so as we're texting, we started playing that, like, who do you like game, where you just like send them that text. And my ego wanted reassurance. So I shot off that text and I was like, well, who do you like? Fully expecting him to say, I like you. That was not what happened. Instead, I received a text back that said, well, actually, I kind of like the first girl I dated, so I think I'm going to go date her now. And 2 hours in, I had already been broken up with after waiting 6 months. So that was kind of the first, time that I really was like, wait, I'm not good enough for this kid. Like I'm not good enough for him to like me. I'm not good enough for him to date me 2 hours and 1 minute. So that's really where that I'm not good enough kind of laid its foundation. The next day, this other kid asked me out who was in my class, and he was actually my first crush, like starting in kindergarten. But I thought it was a little suspicious because honestly, he just dated all of the girls who the other kid would break up with. So I didn't necessarily feel like, stoked about it. However, if we don't count my 2-hour relationship, here I am, first relationship again. And so we're dating, so texting throughout the week. But I ended up getting my phone taken away, and who knows what for. I mean, I could write a list on all. And my parents weren't strict. I was just kind of a little shit that did what she wanted. But,
consequences. So I got my phone taken away over the weekend. Well, little did I know that he texted me over the weekend, breaking up with me. So I had a 5-day, we went from 2 hours to 5 days. And I had no idea because I didn't have my phone. So I showed up the next school day on Monday, ready to see him, give him a side hug. And everyone was kind of looking at me. No one was really, talking to me. And then I figured out he broke up with me. And so we were sitting at the lunch table. And I remember like looking across the lunch table and being like, wow, you're such a dick. And dick was a huge, intense word at that time. I had my brother who was older than me and in middle school. So I was getting all that lingo passed down. So it was shocking. People were like, holy shit, Josie, dropped the D word. But it came out of me naturally. I mean, it was almost like my little bit of, revenge. But in my head, that limiting belief popped up and it was like, okay, Josie, like I'm not good enough for this kid. If I'm not good enough for this kid, I'm fucking toast. And that limiting belief followed me into middle school and high school too. And boys were no joke, brutal to me. During those times, I know that, like I described myself, I was like 2 feet tall, no boobs, braces, the ears, all of it. These boys from different groups, if it wasn't coming from my school, it was coming from, the boys' soccer team. And they would call me Monkey because I have big ears. I can show you guys them. Doo-doo. They used to be a lot bigger because, I grew into my ears. Kind of. They're a little big. They stick out, but we love them. We love them. We love them. That's what I tell myself in times of insecurity. Or they would call me Mini-Me from Austin Powers. And so 9 out of 10 times this shit was about my appearance. And that was tough to handle because there's not much I could do about my appearance at that point. And I tried to zhuzh it up with a little makeup. My makeup choices were clearly not attractive. I was a blue mascara, blue eyeliner girl. The quality of the products I bought were just not it. So I wasn't doing myself a service by wearing makeup, but at that point I was like grasping for straws. Like, what the fuck do I need to do? But really the worst was in high school. And this is a savage story. And I can come to laugh at it, but at the time it was pretty intense. It was freshman year. We were a few months in, and I was in this jewelry class, which it wasn't really my jam. Like, you had these tiny thin saws and you had to like saw through metal. It wasn't easy, and like your hands just smelt like pennies. It was not it. But there was a very, very, very popular senior who was in that class, and he even sat at my table. Everyone knew him. Everyone talked about him. He was a big deal. And one day in class, he looks up at me and he says, you kind of look like Dobby from Harry Potter. Do you mind if I call you Dobby? And the sad thing was, at first, I took it as a term of endearment. I was like, oh my God, like he noticed me. Oh my gosh, like this is kind of a big deal. And then it kind of settled in, and I realized that he was like calling me, an ugly little bald troll. Not troll. I don't want to call Dobby a troll. An elf, a house elf. I didn't say no to him about calling me Dobby because it felt nice at the time to be acknowledged. But then the rest of the year, he called me Dobby, and of course, being that he was the popular kid, it caught on, and there were a lot more people that began to call me Dobby. And this was freshman year of high school, like when, you're trying to start fresh. So I started fresh as Dobby. And I remember just thinking to myself, once again, like the similar stories, is I'm not good enough. And this one was even deeper because it really was, I'm not good enough to even be acknowledged as a human. So as you can see, our beliefs grow deeper and deeper as we have more evidence to make what we believe true. And so in the context of my relationships, I was not, I was always feeling insecure and not good enough when the guys would be douches to me. But really, looking back, I wasn't seeing the situations in their entirety, or I didn't have key pieces of information that may have changed what I made those experiences mean about me. So, for example, these are kind of lighthearted. You can definitely go in deeper, but a key piece of information that would have been helpful when I got broken up with 2 hours into my relationship, if I would have been able to take a step back and say, look at this guy's dating track record. He was into brunettes. Like, it was honestly so fucking obvious. And honestly, I'm a creep and had to go back, check him out on Facebook. Same, brunettes. If I would have had, that little bit of info, I could have chalked it up to like, oh, you got blonde hair. You're blonde. Okay, move on. It probably, I would have been able to maybe be an inch more calm about the situation. Then when it came to being in high school, I made it mean when they would call me Dobby that I was this ugly little house elf with, big ears. However, some minor detail was he was a Harry Potter fan, and maybe it was coming from that. Maybe it was, not meant to be super offensive. We'll see. That's what I'm telling myself, because that is a good point. I mean, maybe Dobby was his favorite character. So, by being able to kind of take myself out of it and being like, well, he was a big Harry Potter fan, so how about I don't read into it too much? And honestly, Dobby is the fucking shit. By far the best Harry Potter character, and the Deathly Hallows killed me. So that was tough for me. But basically what I'm saying is, if I had this information at that time and I was able to process and use this information to digest the situation, there were probably times that I wouldn't have made it mean I'm not good enough for this or I'm not good enough for that. And this belief isn't strictly rooted in my relationships. This spans across my personal life, my finances, my career. Especially, I find it pop up in my career. I would feel like I wasn't good enough. When I was sending a proposal to a client, I was worried, am I good enough to work for a brand of this size? Or am I good enough to be accepted by them? When in reality, I had proof that I had been successful with brands of that size or on those projects. But that didn't matter because I had this previous evidence that was much stronger and much more ingrained. The bitch in your brain doesn't discriminate when it comes to evidence, especially when it comes to protecting us. She's like, if it happened in this situation, it's going to happen in this situation. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's just how it is. And this is when the bitch in our brain and our limiting beliefs become this reinforcement cycle. It's a savage reinforcement cycle. So limiting beliefs provide that underlying framework that gives evidence to the negative bitch in your brain. So propels your negative self-talk. So when your negative belief of I'm not good enough is triggered, the bitch in your brain takes that information and says, you shouldn't do this because you sucked at it last time, or you're going to fail like you did before. So like I said, you're on this reinforcement cycle where your limiting beliefs fuel your negative self-talk, and your negative self-talk reinforces your limiting belief. Like I said, it's a savage cycle, but these are the cards we were dealt. And it's also a self-fulfilling prophecy, because when we tell ourselves we can't do things or we shouldn't do things, we often act out in ways that keep us from doing those things. So the more I told myself I wasn't good enough to send a proposal to a client of that size, it kept me from reaching out to brands of those size, especially brands that I wanted to work with. So ultimately, my fear of not being good enough to work with larger brands kept me from working with people that I desired to work with on projects that I desired to work with. And that was all in service of keeping me in my comfort zone. Staying stuck in your limiting beliefs keeps you from seeing solutions or opportunities or possibilities. And it's essential that if you want to change your life, you have to be open to possibility. You have to be willing to step outside of your comfort zone in order to achieve the change you want. And the great news is you don't have to cling to these limiting beliefs. You're an adult now. We're all grown up. We have the choice to build our beliefs in a positive direction. We can train that muscle to look for what's right instead of looking for what's wrong. So this grown-up version of you can choose, and the most important part of this is the choose part. You have the option. And so the next step is to choose a new empowering belief in support, in service of the change you want to make in your life. And by doing this, we can literally install like new programming. If you kind of think of our brain as a computer, you can install new software. And the more that you lean into that positive, empowering belief, that's going to start to be more your autopilot belief than the limiting belief that you subconsciously were operating on. So I want to share a few things, some tips, some tricks that helped me really start digging into my limiting beliefs, kind of seeing the roots of where they are, and then moving along in and choosing a new empowering belief to support me. So I like to use this framework, and you can do this framework, like I said, journal, notes app. As the more and more you practice, you can probably start doing it in your head. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Pen and paper it is, or thumbs and screen it is. So the first line is, here's the event that occurred. The second line is, here's what I made it mean. The third line is, here's why I know it's not true. And the fourth line is, my new empowering belief is. And so I like to use that framework, and then we can just fill it in with whatever's coming up for you, that day. So using my elementary school dating example, the event that occurred was I was dumped after 2 hours of dating this attractive guy. What I made it mean about myself was that I'm not good enough for boys to like me. The reason why this is not true is I landed a nice as fuck, like as a person, 6'4" bombshell for my Love Island girlies. And we've been dating for 10 years. So I landed, top of the line guy by just being myself too. I mean, we like to smoke weed, but just being myself 95% probably, hopefully. We made it 10 years. So like I said, if it wasn't, I hope he would have cut it off a long time ago. But here we are. So back to the framework. So after saying it's not, this isn't true because I have a boyfriend, my new empowering belief is I am good enough for anything and anyone. Dobby ears, flat chest, braces, and all. So one more time, here's the framework. Here's the event that occurred. This is what I made it mean. Here's why it's not true. And my new empowering belief is. So like add a colon to each of those and yeah, kind of plug and play. Back to pressing upload on the first podcast episode, that limiting belief of I'm not good enough came up. So I had to grab some proof. Once I recorded the first episode, I had sent it to some friends and family to hear their thoughts, get any feedback, dip my toe in the water is kind of an intention as well. So I sent it out as a text, a Google file even, like we weren't on the platforms yet. So after I sent that text, I was sweating bullets waiting for replies. Like I was freaking out, and in my head, the negative bitch in my brain was like, they hate it. The reason they're not texting back is because they don't know what to say. They don't want to hurt your feelings, la da 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 da. But as the day continued, I began getting replies, and a lot of the replies were just like, wow, Josie, this is, so great. It resonated with me and it made me feel seen, heard, and I enjoyed listening to you. And that was the proof that I needed to show myself and to tell myself and embody even, I am good enough to share this podcast with the world. I am good enough to put myself out there and do something bigger than myself. When it comes to time to publish this episode 2, I am very sure that, that limiting belief will pop back up. She's strong now, but we're softening in, we're getting the proof. So when she does start to talk to me, I'm able to refer back to the original messages I received, as well as all of the love and support I received from you guys on the last episode. So there's my proof. And, I believe that I am good enough for anything in the entire world. And by the way, you are good enough for everything too. Thank you guys so much for joining me this week. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to spend this time with you. I know we're not in person. I know that, the time you're listening to this is different, but trust that I can feel your energy. I can feel your presence, and it inspires me. After this episode, you may have some limiting beliefs that you're aware of that are already popping up. So have fun exploring. Just know you're safe. This is, it doesn't have to be scary. It can be a very loving experiment as you go through and take a look at your inner world. If you have any questions, shoot me a DM or let's just chat as well. And this isn't to help with my, podcast growth of like, send me a DM, do this, do that. I'm really just looking to chill and chat. So hit me up, hit my line. I'll be looking for it. I hope you guys have an absolutely amazing week, and I will see you next time.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this episode spoke to you, and I can't wait to continue to share so much more. If you're feeling called, please subscribe and leave a review so together we can reach even more women who deserve to live their best life. And you can follow me on social at The Bitch in My Brain as I share my journey and life in real time. I can't wait to see you bitches next week. Take care.